There are many different advantages to selling your products to the US market. We're going to discuss all those different advantages and what you need to know in order to take your product here to the United States. So I have Jen here. She's the COO and the founder of Ant Hill Retail. She's actually lived in quite a few different countries in Europe and also in Asia. Jen, what do you know about some of those other countries and any advice that you can give people when they're trying to sell products to the US?
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of brands coming into the United States. One of our toothpaste lines that we've worked with in the past was from out of Australia. They only had a couple of grocery chains that were large enough to get a big dollar amount for them that was worth going after. But if they're coming into the United States, they have a huge amount of
very
retailers
decentralized. Yeah,
that they can jump into. For example, we have 397 grocery chains that they have the opportunity to go into, and that's a huge chunk of money for these brands.
I remember that conversation where they're talking about, well, if we either sell to Woolworths or we sell to Kohl's, if we don't sell to one of those two outlets, really we don't have a chance here. But the US is so big and so decentralized, has such a huge population that actually has buying power, your chance of selling in the United States is really, really high.
Yeah, especially if you go after a lot of these chains, even if you get one or two, the buying power of these chains are a lot bigger even than the ones from these other countries.
Yeah, great point. Selling to the US should not be a scary proposition. All you need to do right now is validate your market. Reach out to buyers. Ant Hill, we do a great job of this. We bring in 50 different international brands every single year. They first have us do outreach. They validate the market, make sure there's getting enough interest from the buyers before setting up infrastructure in the United States. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's really easy to just kind of send out some emails to see how nice the market is for you.
Yeah,
you don't want to waste a lot of resources, so an easy way to do that nowadays is just through email.
Yeah, it very low cost and just sending out a few samples. You could go ahead and you can track the samples. See what the buyer response is. If it looks like it's a positive response, it's going to be worth your time. Then set up the necessary pieces to set up the infrastructure in the United States.
And if you really are taking the U.S. seriously, you'll probably want to use a fulfillment house to send out these samples that are based in the United States, or you could use a company like Ant Hill Services. We will help you set up an account and send out those UPS tracking of your samples.
Yeah. Once you've justified bringing your products to the U.S., you're going to want to set up a new U.S. entity. There's a few good tips and tricks for setting up a U.S. entity. Number one, if you can, set it up as an LLC. It's a limited liability corporation. I guess the equivalent in Europe would be GmbH, for example. So what the great benefits of setting up an LLC is if somebody sues you, if there's a lawsuit for the corporation, it's not going to go through you personally. It stops it suing the company. We also highly recommend being taxed as an S-Corp, because you're not paying for Social Security, benefits in the United States that you're not going to be receiving later on. So when setting up a U.S. entity, what state should they be considering and why?
Well, there's definitely certain states that are more friendly to corporations and businesses than others. I would say Utah, Nevada, Delaware.
Really trying to keep those business taxes low is critically important. So many of the different brands that are manufacturing products in China, they're going to typically bring in their products to a port like Long Beach. However, setting up a fulfillment house in California may not be as ideal because you want to be able to ship your products quickly across the country. Any good tips or tricks on that?
Definitely stay in the Midwest, and you want to go with a fulfillment house not only to be able to reach your buyers readily, but you also want to do that because of price point. Anything in the Midwest is going to be really favorable for your budget.
Typically setting up a fulfillment house in the Midwest is ideal because the different retailers have many, many different cross-docks and distribution centers, and you want to typically hit them within a week's time after purchase.
So definitely check out the resource section of this course so that you can find the PDF that talks about what specifics you are looking for when looking for a fulfillment house. It'll give you the ins and outs so that you can make it on a budget.
When selling to the United States, you don't always have to have somebody from the United States be part of the company. You can ship products straight from that country. However, it's strongly urged to set up a U.S. entity and even have a U.S. partner. The reason for this is retailers typically want to work with U.S.-based companies. Doesn't mean the brand or the parent brand has to be a U.S. company, but if they had another company and entity in the United States, just for logistical purposes, it makes it a lot easier on them. Creating an operating agreement with the ownership interests of the company is very critical. You have to know the rules and regulations on how you're going to be playing with each other once you're in the United States. So some examples of why this is important is, imagine if one of the business partners wanted to exit, if there's a death. You also need to be able to clarify who owns the patents of the product, if there are any, or who owns the trademarks. And so it really makes it so you're removing all the mess before you even start. A D&B number, Duns and Bradstreet number, is like a credit score for a business. Some specific retailers are going to want to see what your credit history is like. It's not overly used, but people like Walmart will want to use that. Another point that's really important is UPC codes. Don't purchase a resold UPC code. A lot of companies will resell a UPC code that they've sold to many different people. The problem is, using this example, if you're Walmart, is when you set them up in their system, many of their other products might also have that barcode, and so they don't know who to credit it to. So when you purchase your barcodes, use someone like GS1 or Simply Barcodes and make sure that they're not previously purchased barcodes.
Yeah, they're definitely vetted when you go through a company like that.
There are many different shipping ports in the United States. Typically, in the United States is Long Beach if you're shipping a product in from China, which most goods are. The equivalent of this in Europe is Rotterdam in the Netherlands, right? So that's where a lot of the different fulfillment houses are. That's typically where they ship out products. In the United States, your fulfillment houses can be anywhere. However, use the ports that are going to be closest to your fulfillment houses. If you're bringing products via the water, sometimes it takes up to 30 days, maybe even longer, especially if there's a Chinese New Year's and there's a little bit of delays. It's not always critical, depending on the weight and the size of your products, to use the cheaper version, which is typically seen as the water version, right? So for example, we have some products that we ship in via China that are lightweight and they're small. It's actually cheaper, or just as cheap, to air freight them in. And when you do that, you save 3 weeks. Instead of waiting a month for your products, you can get them as low as 3 or 4 or 5 days. Let's dig deeper now on finding the right fulfillment house for your needs. Fulfillment houses have many different hidden charges. Many of them charge you a daily rate on how many pallets you have. Others have certain pick-pack fees in case they're going to be shipping them to the end consumers. Any recommendations that you have on identifying the right fulfillment house?
Definitely make sure when you are finding a fulfillment house that you're not going to be overcharged during that period of time that you have not received an order yet from a buyer. There will be buying seasons, and so it might take 6 to 9 months before you get enough purchases that they are actually going to be selling and sending out your product for you. Definitely make sure that you negotiate at the beginning that they are going to have your best interest at heart and that they understand that it will take some time, and don't be charged for that period of time that you are just storing their product and not sending out samples.
Yeah, that's a great point. The other thing obviously to keep in mind is make sure that the fulfillment house is EDI compliant. So for small stores in the United States, they send their purchase orders through an attachment like a PDF. Larger stores use what's called EDI, Electronic Data Interchange. It's basically their computer from the retailer to your computer. They need to be able to send invoices and returns and everything else through this system. Make sure that your fulfillment house is EDI compliant.
And the big boys like Target and others, they'll only work with you if you are in a warehouse that has EDI. So you don't want to like set yourself up for failure because you've already shipped all your product to the wrong fulfillment center.
Some prominent EDI providers in the United States are people like SPS Commerce or DataTrans. They know the systems and they know the different requirements from shipping to all these different retailers. They have different setup fees that sometimes can be negotiated. Sometimes they have different fees associated with what specific retailers you're setting up. I highly recommend leveraging these different companies against each other and letting them know that, look, some of these costs can be negotiated. I now want to talk about setting up different banking options in the United States. Jen, what are some of the tips and tricks?
When you are setting up an entity here in the United States, make sure that you have done your research and you have a bank that is also in your parent country and also in the United States. So in our example with the toothpaste company, which was in Australia, they were using Bank of America. And we have other clients like in Hong Kong where they're using Chase Bank. You just have to make sure that that is set up properly in the first go round so that you don't have to make a critical error like that.
Yeah, to set up a bank in the United States, you do have to have one legal U.S. citizen in order to do so. The other partners can be from another country, but just make sure that you have one U.S. partner.
Also, I just wanted to mention that if you are working with the US bank here in the United States, it will look better for you and it will be easier for you to transition into these bigger stores here in America. It really builds trust when you do have a US bank. So we've set ourselves up here at Anthill as an owner equity partner. So if you are coming to the United States and you don't have a legal resident that you can use on the paperwork here, you can use a company like ours.
Partnering with Anthill Retail gives you many, many different benefits. Retail buyers trust Anthill. It'll make the process of coming to the United States so much easier and so much more effective. Let's discuss product liability insurance. Retailers require product liability insurance. In case an end consumer has a problem with your product and sues you, product liability insurance will cover this. Product liability insurance can also cover many different things like your inventory. Most retail outlets will ask between $1 and $5 million of liability, although when negotiated, most will just need $1 to $2 million. When considering bringing your product to the United States, just make sure that your country can actually be sold in the United States. There's 5, 6, 7 different countries right now that are not authorized to sell in the United States. Please make sure your country is not on that list. You might be venturing out just a little bit thinking about bringing your products to the United States, but really it's not that difficult. The chance to open up a new revenue source should greatly outpace the potential drawbacks. So now you should feel confident about what you need to know about selling products to the United States.